in the quiet valleys of Central Asia, more than 1,000 years ago, there was born a man whose mind stretched far beyond the limits of his age. His name was Abu Rayhan Muhammad ibn Ahmad al-Biruni. The world would later remember him simply as Al-Biruni, a man who lived in the 10th and 11th centuries, who studied the stars, measured the earth, explored the laws of nature, and then turned his gaze toward India, not to conquer it with a sword, but to understand it with wonder. When Al-Biruni was born in 973 CE in a small town near Kath in Khwarazm, in what is now Uzbekistan, the Islamic world was passing through a golden age of learning. From Baghdad to Bukhara, from Samarkand to Nishapur, scholars were reading, translating, and questioning everything they knew about the universe. Greek philosophy had been rediscovered, Indian mathematics was being studied, and Persian science was flourishing. In this great world of curiosity, young Al-Biruni grew up surrounded by the sound of pens scratching on parchment, of teachers discussing geometry and astronomy under candlelight. From an early age, Al-Biruni showed an extraordinary thirst for knowledge. He learned Arabic and Persian fluently, and then, driven by his love for science, he began studying Greek and Sanskrit texts. He was fascinated by the movement of stars and planets. He wanted to understand how the heavens worked, how time was measured, and how the shape of the earth could be known without traveling around it. His curiosity led him to experiment, to observe, and to question. By the time he reached adulthood, Al-Biruni had already written works on mathematics, astronomy, and geography. He was known as a thinker who preferred reason over authority, who did not simply repeat what others said, but tested it himself. He was part of a world where science and faith were not seen as opposites, but as two ways of understanding the truth. But the most remarkable chapter of his life was yet to begin. It began when history itself turned, when the armies of Mahmud of Ghazni swept across Central Asia, conquering new lands. Mahmud was a powerful ruler, ambitious, determined, and eager to expand his empire. During one of his campaigns, Al-Biruni, like many other scholars of Khwarazm, was brought to Ghazni. And it was from there, from the court of Mahmud, that Al-Biruni began the journey that would define his legacy, his journey to India. He did not come as a conqueror, nor as a missionary. He came as an observer, a listener, a student of the human mind. Around the year 1017 CE, Al-Biruni crossed into the Indian subcontinent, a land of immense diversity, filled with temples, languages, philosophies, and traditions stretching back thousands of years. Imagine his first impression, coming from the cold, dry mountains of Khorasan to the lush plains of the Indus and Ganges, where the air was thick with the smell of incense and mango trees, where the people spoke Sanskrit, Prakrit, and countless dialects, where music, mathematics, and metaphysics intertwined in daily life. Al-Biruni was astonished. He had read about India from travelers and traders, but now he was standing inside it, a world of deep faith, ritual, and intellectual sophistication. Unlike many before him, he did not dismiss what he could not understand. He wanted to know. He wanted to learn why Indians calculated time differently, why they viewed the cosmos through cycles rather than linear time, why they believed in reincarnation and karma, and how they developed advanced mathematics centuries before Europe. He began to study Sanskrit, the language of scholars and sacred texts. It was not easy. Sanskrit was complex, filled with layers of meaning, and written in many scripts. But Al-Biruni had patience. He sat with Brahmin scholars, listened to their teachings, and compared their ideas with those of the Greeks and Persians. Slowly, he began to unlock the secrets of Indian science and philosophy. For years, he lived among Indian scholars, in temples, in courts, and in towns along the Indus and the Ganges. He studied their calendars, their religious festivals, their methods of astronomy. He found that Indian astronomers had measured the Earth and the movements of planets with surprising precision. They knew the length of the solar year, they had calculated eclipses, and they had developed trigonometric functions long before the word existed in Arabic or Latin. Al-Biruni was impressed, deeply impressed. He recorded everything, not as a conqueror describing the spoils of war, but as a scientist describing a living civilization. His most famous work from this time was Kitab fi Tahqiq ma lil Hind, often translated as the Book of India. It was unlike any book written before it. It was not a travelogue or a political report. It was a study of Indian culture, religion, science, and philosophy, written by a foreigner who truly tried to understand. In this great book, Al-Biruni described India as he saw it, honestly, respectfully, and critically. He wrote about Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and their shared ideas about the soul and the universe. He described how Indians divided time into vast cosmic cycles, called yugas, and how they viewed creation as eternal and cyclical. He compared these ideas to Greek thought and Islamic philosophy. He did not mock them, he analyzed them. He noted the similarities between Indian and Greek mathematics, between the Indian decimal system and the numerical methods that were transforming the Islamic world. He even explained the concept of zero and positional notation, which had traveled from India through the Arabs to the rest of the world. Without India, he wrote, much of modern arithmetic would not exist. But Al-Biruni also saw the challenges of communication between civilizations. He wrote that Indians were proud of their culture, often too proud, and that they sometimes refused to engage with foreigners. Likewise, many Muslims at the time looked down upon Indian traditions as strange or superstitious. Al-Biruni stood between these worlds, trying to build a bridge of understanding. He wrote, "We must be fair to them, just as we wish them to be fair to us." His book was filled with detail. He described the rivers of India, the geography of its regions, the way cities were planned. He explained the caste system, not as an outsider condemning it, but as a sociologist trying to understand its structure and purpose. He wrote about Indian music, medicine, and astrology. He translated portions of Sanskrit texts, including parts of the Bhagavad Gita and Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, into Arabic, opening them to readers who had never heard of these works before. And through it all, what stands out most is Al-Biruni's humility. He never claimed to know everything. He constantly questioned himself, asking whether his translations were fair, whether his observations were complete, whether his understanding was accurate. This intellectual honesty, this willingness to admit the limits of his own knowledge, made him one of the greatest scholars of his age. He also made significant scientific observations while in India. He studied how shadows changed with latitude, how the Earth's curvature affected distance, and how time could be measured by the position of the stars. Using these observations, he estimated the Earth's circumference with remarkable accuracy, far ahead of his time. He connected the Indian system of coordinates with Greek and Islamic methods, helping to merge the world's geographical knowledge into one framework. But his greatest contribution was not mathematical or astronomical. It was human. He showed that understanding another civilization requires respect, patience, and curiosity. In an age of conquest, when many sought to dominate, he sought to comprehend. He believed that truth was not owned by one people or one religion, that it could be found anywhere if one looked deeply enough. Even after returning from India, Al-Biruni continued to write about it for years. His fascination never faded. He compared Indian ideas with those of Aristotle, Plato, and Pythagoras. He saw how mathematics could bridge cultures, how language could divide or unite people, and how faith could inspire both wisdom and misunderstanding. He lived during a time when the world was far less connected than today, yet he managed to see across borders of culture and religion. In that sense, Al-Biruni was not only a man of the past, he was a man of the future. His approach to knowledge, patient, respectful, comparative, remains an example for all who wish to understand rather than judge. In his later years, he returned to Ghazni, where he continued his research until his death in 1050 CE. Surrounded by his books, instruments, and memories of India, he wrote until his final days. It is said that even as he lay on his deathbed, he asked a friend to explain a mathematical problem to him. Knowledge for Al-Biruni was not a possession. It was a journey, one that never truly ended. Today, when we think about the meeting of civilizations, about the exchange between East and West, Al-Biruni stands as a symbol of what is possible. He was not a missionary, not a soldier, not a merchant, but a bridge builder between minds. His writings remind us that understanding begins not with power, but with curiosity. Think of it. A man from Khwarazm standing under the Indian sky thousands of miles from home, writing about things that would one day help connect the intellectual worlds of Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. His curiosity carried no army. His tools were books, questions, and an open heart. Even today, when we read his words, we feel the same wonder he must have felt. The wonder of standing before a civilization both ancient and alive, and realizing that knowledge is vast enough to belong to everyone. So, as we remember Al-Biruni, we should ask ourselves, in our time of division and noise, can we still see the world with his sense of wonder? Can we study other cultures not to compare, but to connect? Can we learn, as he did, to see difference not as a threat, but as an opportunity to grow? Because in the end, Al-Biruni's greatest discovery was not a scientific law or a philosophical theory. It was a truth older than time. That curiosity is the bridge that joins all human hearts.